When you talk about shopping and all, recently there's been a conversation about shopping, particularly shopping in supermarkets, and that's what we want to have a conversation on this morning. The Competition Authority of Kenya has flexed not just one, but almost all its muscles.
At the same time.
Yes, at the same time. And it has cracked down on a company called operating as Kafu in the Kenyan market. And that's what we want to discuss. Kafu is part of the Retail Trade Association of Kenya. And they have also responded and said, surely. Hi, what is all this, Buana? Okay, so we have both of them in the studio. The manager for buyer power at the Competition Authority of Kenya, Dr. Priscilla Njako, is one of our guests, joined by Willy Kimani, who is the lead of the supermarket sector at RETRAK and also founder of Jazza Group. Willy, good morning.
Good morning to you.
It's been a while, Buana.
Yeah, it has become an annual.
Yeah, it's just like coming once a year. Yeah. This is your once a year
visit.
This is the visit.
Yes.
Aha.
Yeah.
Dr. Priscilla, karibu sana.
Asante sana.
Kenya's biggest conversation. That is the hot seat. Willy has been here before. He knows how to cool it down. But you and I will help us to warm it up for him.
Perfect.
Karibu.
Asante sana.
To welcome you to the conversation, City usually goes to one country across Africa and brings us African proverbs from that country. This week, he's been to another country in Africa and he brings us African proverbs from that country. Which country is this?
I think you're familiar with this country. It's on the East African coast. Yes, it neighbors Somalia, Ethiopia, Southern Sudan, Tanzania, Uganda, and the Indian Ocean.
That's one country neighboring
all these things, yes. And I think you know the country. You probably visited it on many occasions. In fact, you look like the person who has actually visited and even lived there.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, okay, fine. Which one would this be? That neighbors everyone in Africa. The only country I didn't hear you list there is Malawi. It doesn't neighbor Malawi.
You know, because you're a guest, we can't even list Malawi.
Sure, Malawi.
Right. Yeah.
It's Kenya.
Oh, all right. Yeah. I need to do an annual pilgrimage like Willy here. It can just help me, you know?
The proverbs we've had the whole of this week have only been proverbs that were translated in whichever language into the English language. So we felt that it would be remiss if we had an entire week of proverbs and didn't have a proverb in the Kiswahili language. So today's proverb is in the Kiswahili language. Makali ya jicho yashinda wembe.
Makali ya jicho
yashinda wembe.
Yashinda wembe. Do you get it, Dr. Priscilla?
I believe I do.
Okay. What's your interpretation of it? What's the translation?
Into English?
Please.
The effect, the sharpness of the eye is worse or is stronger than that of a razor.
Dude say voila.
She can.
Yes.
Voila. Thank you.
How do you interpret it?
In the sense that a look sometimes communicates more than the cut of a razor, in the sense of may cause more pain, it may have deeper impact, may have higher effect, worse than the physical pain.
I agree. You see, the beauty of preferring your own opinion is you really can't be wrong.
Excellent.
You see, it's how you respond to the proverb, and it's how it resonates with you. So, as they say in modern English, you are good to go.
Asante sana.
Kabisa.
Kabisa.
Would you have a different interpretation, Willy?
No, actually, I fully agree. If you just interpret it with just your mom looking at you and you're messing up. I will not touch that chapati over that festive season. But at times that particular, it communicates more, as in, and all that. So there is a bigger meaning on that, bigger, deeper bit of that, and that's why they say even when you're actually having the whole national conversation, it's when you're actually people looking at you and saying, okay, it's and I know of many people who will actually be like, it's better someone to come and beat me physically but not to eat and look at me in that particular stare. So I fully agree with Dr.
Very good. Very good. Before we come into this conversation, really, you, somebody who's big in the restaurant industry is called a restaurateur. Somebody who's big in the supermarket industry is called a
retailer.
It would have been fun to hear you wrap your tongue around.
Supermarketeur.
Yeah.
So, as a seasoned retailer, now you're singing Jazza Group. What's Jazza Group?
So
We don't know you as Jazza Group.
Yeah, so Jazza is a new kid in the retail block. We saw that there was a gap in the market for a hard discounter. So what we're doing, of course, the macroeconomics have not been good, and there needed to be someone who can actually come out here and say, hey, guess what? I'm going to do a model that is actually out there, the Aldi Beam model, the Boxer model out there, which is a no-frill model, cut completely on your cost of operation, work with very few brands, and pass that particular benefit to the end customer. So this is us. We now have 3 stores, in fact opening 1 more today. From here I'm going directly to Githurai to open another store, our 4th store. We intend to have at least 6 stores by the end of the year, and another.
The year is ending next week, boss.
Yes. So I intend to open another store in Kayole, Choka and Gashie, and we're doing this in a matter to just address that particular bit that times are hard. Times are hard, and someone needs to do something specific to that lower target market that is giving up choice for value. So at Jazza, what you're targeting more is you not come and find the fancy lights and all those things. Is the choice part of it. So it's a value part of it. So you come there, you find Unga the best price. And how is it? Making sure you optimize on operation cost, making sure that you actually working with only fewer suppliers and getting the particular deals in. That's what Jazza is all about. And of course, launching the Kenya's first WhatsApp e-commerce, which is way simpler and easier for people to just quickly shop about it. That's what Jazza is all about.
She is smiling.
I am smiling because when one uses the word no frills in business, one always thought of these airlines where I think apart from carrying your own food, you might as well carry your own seat.
And your luggage on your lap.
Luggage on your lap.
Na mafuta yako kwa jerrycan. Okay. All the best, Willy.
Thank you very much.
All the best. Dr. Njako, you are the manager of Buyer Power, the competition authority. We've hosted other managers at Competition Authority. And in fact, the last time we had a conversation, the issue of buyer power came in, and we're given some good explanation around it. And then, no sooner had we started understanding buyer power than we hear,
We saw the effect.
1 billion. Like, huh? What's all that? So let's get into this particular instance where you feel that buyer power has been misused. Okay, give us a background.
Thank you very much, Eric. The background is this, that under the Act, there are a number of offences against the Competition Act 2010. One of those offences is abuse of buyer power. There are those that people are pretty familiar with, restrictive trade practices and cartels. But there is also buyer power added into the Act about the beginning of 2017. And basically, the Act makes abuse of buyer power an offence, and punishable by a criminal sanction, but also punishable in the alternative through administrative sanctions, and financial penalties are one such administrative sanction. But just basically buyer power, very quickly in a nutshell, is the ability or the influence a buyer in a powerful position can exert to extract terms which, while highly advantageous to them, actually disproportionate and injurious or detrimental to the supplier, or terms that are unfair, or terms that are not related to the stated objective of the contract, because it's the core of the contract, but then there's all these other terms around that do not relate in any way to the objective of the supply contract. Or alternatively, it's also the exertion of power by a powerful buyer to extract terms that are outside of normal trade or outside a supplier's ordinary contractual terms, with the effect that the supplier's price and returns are reduced, profitability goes down, they may have to sell below cost, etc., etc. To this specific case, what happened is that the authority began investigations in two cases, August 2022, and then there was another complaint again that came in December 2022 of the same year. But previously to this, the authority had actually issued a determination against this specific undertaking, and that was at the beginning of 2020, exactly in similar circumstances. And so what was the complaint? The complaint was that there was abuse of buyer power by this retailer, Kafu, operating, that's a trade name, of course, Majid Al Futtaim is the name of the company. And so the complaint was that this retailer has engaged in conduct that amounts to abuse of buyer power in the following ways: extracting rebates whose effects, and they are fixed, they are not negotiable, that and the effect of those rebates are to increasingly push the supplier to the corner in terms of their profitability, in terms of the price, also to create uncertainty, because part of the rebates were annual and they applied to the annual sales for that year. So there's a further deduction to the final invoice. And so, of course, at the beginning of the year, while it is possible to forecast, you cannot forecast with absolute certainty. So I do not know how much I'll finally sell to Kafu. Therefore, I cannot tell how much I will finally surrender from my returns. Another complaint was that this retailer had required these suppliers to send staff, employees, on their cost to work in the branches of this retailer, occasionally to take overnight stock taking, and so therefore this is actually the business of the retailer. And then the final complaint was that there was threats of unilateral termination upon request to negotiate, so that the supplier asks, could we discuss this? Is this negotiable? It's hurting my business. This is shortly post-COVID, and the push is right there. The economic circumstances are not as perfect as they were previously, not perfect, as good as they were previous. Could we talk? And the threat was that, no, we cannot talk. It's either this way or the highway. And subsequent, when we commenced our investigations, subsequently, because this conduct was ongoing, remember in 2020, this is investigations we had conducted, and had come to a conclusion, a determination, which the Competition Tribunal has upheld, because we're still in the current situation. And so we required the retailer to cease and desist, hold on, pause, while we investigate. Should we find there's no liability, well and good, you pick up, you can recover whatever back fees you want to charge on the supplier. But should we find you liable, then, this matter will take due course. And shortly after we issued that cease and desist order, it was in the press, because we had to gazette under Section 37 of the Act. The retailer promptly then, terminated the contract as a retaliatory measure. And so that's the environment we found ourselves in, because the conduct of that nature, the conduct there was complaints about, is actually listed. The Act sets out the following cannot be done, and the Act is absolutely clear on that. And so hence, here we are with a penalty of 1.108 billion shillings. And it's important to point out that this penalty is actually on two matters. So it's actually 554 million shillings. I know everyone is running with the 1 point, but there are two infractions of the law, each of which is attracting 5 point.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's clear.
555.
You started with the, and I think just to understand, you started with the law and what the law says you cannot do. Then we've looked at what was, and this is not allegations, this is what now was shown to be the case after having gone to the authority, then gone to the tribunal, and then gone to court, right? Court upholds what the tribunal had established in the beginning, right? My question is it clear for retailers from the very beginning what the Act says in terms of how they can or cannot operate? The way you've listed them out, very clear. Do retailers have access to this clarity in terms of what their actions would be as compared to what the law states?
Thank you. Absolutely. I would say absolutely that they do. And let me speak about retailers generally, and then I'll speak about this Kafu, this specific retailer. Retailers generally, this law has been in place since the year 2016. 2017 January took effect, passed in December 2016. And subsequent to that, the authority has engaged in a lot of sensitization. We have had sensitization initiatives. I see Willy is nodding his head because we have worked together. And as recently as mid-November, my team was in Kisumu for the week, talking with members of RETRAK, talking with members of CAM, and talking with AKS members, Association of Kenya Suppliers, and also SMEs, right, generally. And so there has been a concerted effort, very aggressive, active effort by the authority. So every year we have had, what are they called? We have had sensitization sections. Number two, we have worked very closely with the retail, with the sectors players in that space, and there is actually tangible proof in the form of a code of practice which the authority gazetted, called the members together. There had been efforts to put together a code previously under State Department of Trade, but when the authority got now the mandate under the Act, members were gathered together. We had engagement, put together a code of practice, and the code of practice was gazetted by the authority to give it some, to tack it within the Act. And so you can see that we are not strangers to retailers. Let me come down to Majida for time. This retailer, we have had previous enforcement, and this was in the year 2020, which you have just a reference to. And this matter, same thing. Excessive rebates, demands to send suppliers, return of goods upon ordering goods. So I order this number of cartons, and when they arrive, I tell you, no, actually, I just wanted one carton. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. And remember, this may be perishable goods, maybe yogurt. Like in the case we investigated and concluded completely to the end, that gives this retailer clarity on what the law is, what you can and cannot do, involved perishable goods, yogurt. Okay, and so return of yogurts. I'm sorry that a kind of situation. And so this specific retailer is more aware than all others, actually, because upon our determination, you cannot do this, you will need to amend your contracts, and here is a small fine for you to pay. The retailer then appealed to the tribunal, and the tribunal considered the matter, considered what we had placed on the table, our analysis, considered the retailer's response, and held, retailer, you're in the wrong. The authority is right. You're going to have to stop this. And then it's at that point that the retailer then escalated to the High Court. But the matter has been pending for the last 3 years.
So the retailer has interacted with the law.
Very closely.
Definitely
a little too
so.
closely.
Yeah. Okay. Willy, at the Retail Trade Association, you obviously bring in very many members of and players in the retail sector. Is the law clear?
The law is
as clear as Dr. Njako explains it?
The law is very clear, and I have to point out that the harmonized code of practice was more like a tripartite agreement, and we picked quite a lot from the British Code of Retail Practice, and KAM, Kenya Association of Manufacturers, Association of Kenyan Suppliers, AKS, RETRAK, under the guidance then of the Ministry of Trade, and a lot of involvement with the Competition Authority. Members, we actually came up with that, and at that time the biggest issue was prompt payment. It was the time that we are seeing the collapse of Nakumat. There was a bit of shaky bits when it comes to Uchumi and everyone, and we all came in together to say, hey, you know what, there needs to be a code of conduct. Everybody was on the retailer's neck, and in principle it was to agree on how do we grow, how do we start trading with each other, a supplier to a manufacturer or a retailer. How do we ensure that we're able to compensate each other? How do we ensure that there's a particular rebate? How do we do about payments? What comes first? Is it, for example, the credit days or the credit limit and things like that? And how do we put all that into law? And so that code was actually done. We signed it off. And yes, it is actually there. But then again goes this whole aspect which says I am going to sign up, and it's very clear in the code. It clearly states that every retailer shall be assumed to have actually agreed on what is called the joint business plan or the supply agreement together with the, and that's a point of where we actually get a bit of difference, because if I have agreed with my supplier that is going to be supplying me XYZ, at what point does it now become buyer power when clearly trade changes? I'll give you a good example. If it's a COVID time and you had already given out an LPO for books, but schools have now been closed. I mean, we're going to receive the books to take them away. Is that point you need a negotiation? You need to actually talk. At that point, is it buyer power now when I'm actually buying and putting up those books? What are the mechanics that we've now put in? And that's why then we had what is called a committee that was set up that had various representation from members to be able to help us to solve those particular kind of disputes, including the payment bits of it or elements within the same. And so all what we actually came in and within our presser is to say, hey, we will always have variations. There are times that the shop is actually shrinking. The shelf is shrinking. If you notice, we no longer have the biggest stores, but suppliers and manufacturers are innovating, and that means things will change. And how you now look at what is called the joint business plan or the supply agreement, once I've signed it and we are already in agreement, and then there's a conflict, then you rush to CAK. Does that become abuse of buyer power? We agreed, we signed, you're okay with it, you said for every store I'm opening you're going to give me XYZ. So now it's reached a point where you're not giving. You signed it.
So RETRAK's argument here is, if you agreed to the terms of a contract, then abide by the contract. And it's not necessarily abuse of buyer power if you signed it.
And always have variations and discussion. So the issue is not as such, the issue is we should always have the discussion points, and when we disagree, let's follow the protocol of actually having at least sector members and all that, so that we don't use a machine gun to actually it's and if you look at the quantum, for example, we're talking about 16 million shillings worth of rebates and all that versus that's 544 twice. That quantum is way higher, and retailers operate on very thin margins. Net margin for one retailer should be between 4 to 6%. In fact, a very successful retailer out there possibly will be like on around 7 to 8%. So a figure like whatever we actually saw clearly just puts that competitor out.
It's too much.
And he's out. And that retailer will most probably just not be able to sustain or even be able to actually operate anymore. So that's a different note. But the most important part of the component is the aspect that when we have an agreement, at what particular level or what meets the threshold of actually being buyer power, and more so when you signed up.
Okay. Daktari, Willy has raised the question, what is this threshold that you use to know that there's abuse of buyer power?
All right. Thank you very much. What we use is actually the Act. the Act sets certain requirements, and that speaks very directly to the fact that you could agree on a contract and determine that this is a contract and give what is actually apparent consent. But that contract, as long as it flies in the face of the law, you could agree on it till the cows come home. The law is the law. That contracts that facilitate, the threshold is 1, the contract, and 2, the conduct that contract facilitates, and engaging in that conduct is actually what the offense is. And so the threshold we used is very, very thorough, and again it addresses the question Willy raised, the issue of a very unhappy or disgruntled supplier. I'll run off to the authority. The thing is that the authority has a staircase, kind of very tiered and very methodical and very fair way of ensuring that we sieve out anything that may actually just be unhappiness on the part of a supplier. There is the Act, so just to keep it very quick, there are 3 levels under the Act. We look at the nature and determination of the contract, so that we ask, was there consent? Was this contract actually agreed or handed down to the supplier with a dotted line, sign here? And then one may ask, okay, why didn't the supplier just say, oh, I won't sign, I'm off, I'll supply to Jazza, for instance. And I'll come back to why the supplier doesn't go signs and why the authority takes that into account. So the nature of the contract, what are the terms in that contract? The determination of a contract, how was the contract applied, agreed? Is it a standard form contract? And in the case of this retailer, Kafu, the contracts are standard form, indeed, on Kafu's letterhead. Standard, always, at all times. And so
it's not negotiated.
It is not effectively, it's not a negotiated, and that's why we are where we are. Otherwise, we wouldn't be. Then we look at the payment asked for access to infrastructure, listing fee. So for me to open a new when I open a new branch, for you to come close to even set foot in, I need a check, 200,000 shillings or 50,000 shillings. Okay?
Per branch?
Per branch.
To put my products in your branch.
To put your products in that branch. The other thing, so that's the second element we look at. The third one, we look at the price. What is the effect of the conduct on the price the supplier has? Is it injurious to a point that the supplier may actually have to wind up, let go of employees, exit the market? Remember, most of these players are actually SMEs. SMEs carry the economy, the Kenyan economy. 40% of the GDP, right? 70% of all employment, direct or indirect. 85% of all new jobs in any 1 year, same sector. And suppliers are likely to be small. And so we must ask, what is the effect of this? Then we are not done when we're finished with the 3 levels in the Act. We then go to the buyer power guidelines. We want to be thorough and meticulous. We ask, was this supplier economically dependent on the retailer to a point that they could not exit, or exit would have been much more detrimental than sitting in and enduring, giving what is apparent consent. We also ask, what is the nature of the market? The players, how many players are in this market? What are their market shares? We look at the products. Okay, the long and short is that we do not have a situation where there's a complainant who is just unhappy. And to address now very specifically, Kafu, because this is the matters we investigated, indeed, the 2 suppliers were still on board. So they were not disgruntled, I am off, we parted acrimoniously, I'll take you to the authority. Indeed, the intention was, could we stay without these terms, which tells you they are probably they are economically dependent on being able. And remember, the retailer is a gateway to the market. So I have my produce here. I don't have a retail shop. I need to get to the consumer, and so there's a gatekeeper here who extracts, value to a point that you limp through the gate.
But then, Daktari, and Willy, you can come in here. What would the retailer be looking at? The retailer wants to stay in business, wants to stay afloat. The retailer is shouldering all the costs. rent for the space, power and all the operational costs for the space, marketing so that people can come bring footfall into the retail store so that your goods can leave my shelves. Is the retailer expected to consider all that and all those costs when we are talking about this particular engagement?
Yeah.
To what extent?
Absolutely. They must. And we must also keep in mind that the supplier is also bearing costs on their end. So that at the end of the day, we do not look at the retailers if they're the only, we place them in a special pedestal where they are this special child, quote unquote. But also allow me to say that the other thing is that that these supplier, we must ask, at what cost are they still keeping up with the payments? But there's something that, just one quick one, which I want to address because Willy had raised it, 16 million vis-a-vis the penalty, and I believe you have asked the size of the penalty. Let me address that. Number one, I need us to divert our attention away from the penalty for 30 seconds, actually for 10. There are other requirements in that determination. Actually, the most critical for the authority and for the economy is a certain requirement sitting there that no one wants to look at. And the requirement is that the contracts for this retailer, and allow me to say that we have not received complaints of this nature regarding any other retailer, any other member. So, Bwana Willy, I'm also very curious. You have a special child in the house. But we have not, and we do not. And so it's a bit, and maybe you'll address that special child bit. But the thing is this, there's a requirement which we are repeating again, because we stated it 2020, the tribunal repeated it loudly. We are repeating it again 4 years later, that please review your contracts to expunge these onerous, punitive, unnegotiable terms. So that is what we want really now the country to focus on. But now let me go to what we all want to focus on. And that is the penalty. Now, there is a 16 million shillings refund of rebates deducted. Okay? That is actually not the offense. The offense is abuse of buyer power and having terms that the law is very clear about. And so connect the conduct to the penalty. Now, the one thing I also need us to talk about on the penalty is it's high relative to what? What is it high in relative to? So because I'm able to tell you how I arrived at it. In determining this penalty, the authority took into account certain factors already set out, which the retailer was aware of because they sit in our finding and settlement guidelines. We asked, what is the gravity and extent of the contravention? Is this a repeat offender, recidivism? Was there cooperation? Okay. What is the damage caused on the supplier? And what is the duration of this contravention? How long has it gone on? And so on and so forth. And then we also asked, because those are aggravating factors, they push the penalty up. But we also asked, are there mitigating factors? Is it possible that the offender was not aware of the occurrence of the existence of this offense? And what is their contribution maybe to the economy? Might they be giving, and I know this will come up, lower prices? Is their consumer welfare? And so at arriving at 554, we took 554 million shillings. We took into account all of these factors. Finally, still on the penalty, the law actually requires that the authority may impose a penalty of up to 10% of the gross annual turnover of the undertaking under investigation for the previous year. And so the law allows a top ceiling of 10%. If you do a quick computation, and I know Willy will agree with me, the figure of 1.1 billion shillings, actually 554, one contravention, 554, another contravention, is well below 2%. In other words, 3%, 2%. So really, it could have been infinitely worse. But we need to ask. So it's high relative to what?
Really, you got a lot to respond.
Yeah, one of the key things is one, of course, and again, Section 3, Part 3 of the conduct order, you actually speak about variations. It's very clear. A supplier agreement joint business plan shall be mandatory in the supplier-retailer relationship under the code. And that is the part that now we have to actually discuss and say, if this is the case, and Kafu, unlike others, goes in and actually has more than around 80% of the customers signed up to the supplier agreement. And there are two agreements here. There's a supplier agreement which first of all dictates how we will be trading, and then there's what is called the joint business plan, which now has the double click on it, which means within the year this is how we trade, this is what expected to do, and we always have what is called reviews every quarter or 3 months, or depending half yearly, depending with how you have. So these are two different documents. So here comes in someone like Kafu, who has very good estate. He has a very good real estate. A supplier 1, 2, 3, 4 wants to be on that shelf, as in you don't want to miss out to be on junction. Yeah. The first thing you do is what? Just sign any paper that is there. Now you're on, and then you go like,
what did I just sign?
Later on. Or maybe you didn't have them. And then at that particular point, now that's when now you're now saying, hey, guess what? Within this, because we have other suppliers who never signed and are supplying Kafu. And they actually negotiated. In fact, within that contract, if you look at the Kafu contract, has very many other elements, including CSR, including marketing support, and all this is variable. If, for example, even the
variable, not negotiable.
Yes. For example, the merchandising bit, it's all negotiable. Within, because it is there, but you can actually say 0 or 2.5% or 1% or 3%. So if you have to take a whole like all the Kafu contracts and just look at supplier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you'll find these are percentages different from this other percentages different because it's negotiated. That is the part that now comes in. But now one person who had already signed up, or the other person who signs up and all that, it's more of a formalization. For example, if I was to address something like listing fees, one of the biggest headaches that suppliers have, and remember, suppliers are the backbone of retail. They are very important guys. Now, as in, without them, we are nothing. One of the hardest bits of most Kenyan suppliers, if today you had a new factory producing baso or something, getting into that shelf becomes a very tricky affair. And in most cases, you'll find suppliers are even willing to pay something chini ya meza. Unajua ile kupata ile ka supply na ka contract,
just so that you get space.
So here comes in Kafu, who says, no, this thing,
let's formalize this thing.
So now it's formalized.
It's juu ya meza.
Iko juu ya meza.
You shall pay this much.
Yes.
So that you get space.
And other players might actually be saying, hey, guess what? No. For any store that I have, I expect you to give me a 10 for 1.
Okay.
So a different language, or 6 for 1, as in it's a discounted that we are actually negotiating. Or please, for every store that I'm actually creating, because remember, I'm investing in people, investing in real estate, investing in all the equipment, I'm paying deposit for rental period and stuff. Anytime I'm opening a new store, I'm giving you more market.
Yeah.
During that particular bit, then also give me maybe extended credit terms for the first invoice.
Okay, so Willy,
so that's where.
Sorry. So this is what you're saying is that it was or is accepted practice in the market, as it were, that this is something everybody knows happens, more or less, isn't it?
There's always a negotiated bit. I think the key question here that you're asking ourselves is under this formalized approach, and the competitive needs and edge of requiring yourself to be on that shelf.
Sure.
How it looks like.
Now, if that is understood, because this particular subject of this fine is not the only retailer, but from what Daktari has said here, they're the only ones for which there have been numerous complaints. So if this is accepted practice, why do we then just see one of the retailers have this perennial issue?
Yeah, and I will not want to actually dive into the whole bit because, again, the need to be in the most, let's be honest, the most premium malls currently, top 5 stores in the country, actually Kafu stores, by virtue of grossing the numbers, actual numbers per store. A store like a Sarit Center will actually be doing the X number of other smaller, other chains, number of stores. So they have, as in, the need to be in that space is so much so that it becomes so competitive. Because remember, these are the ex-Nakumat stores. Yeah. These are the ex-Nakumat sites that already had a lot of historical, as in missing out.
People knew where to shop.
Yeah.
There are stores that nobody ever wants. You never want to miss out being in a Naivas Westlands. You can never want to miss out being in a
Kafusa Reet.
in a Kafusa Reet, and also a bit as in for you and at any one given point you'll find that there's that whole need and fight.
And that's what Ndu is saying. So that means that
there's
you
some
know
power.
you have power.
You know you have power, and because of that power that you know you have, then there is a possible penchant then for wanting to wield that power, because you know that suppliers will do anything they can to get on your shelves.
That includes, by the more we actually go and open the stores, because it's everybody, it's all the people competing for that same store. Same shelf. As in, that shelf, for example, if you was to take one category, let's take tissue, for example. How many tissue brands do you know in this market? Many tissue brands. By the time which one will you have, which one will you not have? At that particular point, if you all want me, then let's negotiate. See, I have a very nice premium asset. Then also allow me to be, for this particular space, to have a negotiation.
I understand.
And so that negotiation does not become buyer power. It is. I have a good
It's
place.
leverage.
I've invested in a nice place. So,
Okay.
so should I just make it easy?
Understood, Willy. But if
So it's not, but it's leverage.
And
Yes.
let me-
And my shelf is small.
now,
Yes.
what you're saying,
Yes.
enter the law,
Yes.
right? And the law, from what I understand, has come in to balance this position
Yes.
that some retailers will inadvertently be in by virtue of the fact of some of the things that you've talked about.
True.
Prime property, prime space, prime location. And if you have a handle on 5 in the city, in the capital city, you're in a good spot, right? So just like you've said, 10 tissue brands are fighting to be on your shelves. It'll put some feathers in your cap. So that what we're saying now, then there is a temptation, or you've been given the position where you can actually dictate who does what. But my question is, knowing that, have they then played along the lines that have been previously set by the law?
Yeah. So the question is one. It's just like joining a national school.
Oh, don't get me started.
Not everybody can join that national school. And the question here becomes, when you now agree to the terms that I had, do you now start varying the contract and actually taking me to competition
Now, it is
authority?
the terms that you had, that's the issue.
No, but you're signing first. So why are you signing? So you're signing and agreeing to that particular agreement. And then now when you're in and you're saying, anytime I'm actually being told to bring someone, I'm already signed.
Willy,
I'll be bringing
Dr.
someone.
even said
Yes.
that even at the point of signing, if the contract that you're offering me is outside of the law,
Yes.
it's illegal from the very beginning, signed or not.
Ab initio, as
ab
lawyers
initio.
would say.
Point.
And that is the part that you're saying as retailers. If you're not happy with this, please pass these particular mechanisms. If you're already within the system, there's the committee that has actually been set within, and that particular committee has members of retail, RETRAK, Kenya Association of Manufacturers, Association of Kenya Suppliers. I think there might be 2 other players in there. And within there, you can be able to say, no, we had agreed this man will be paying me after every 30 days. Now he's actually paying me after 45
It
days.
sounds like it's akin to the individual who's given testimony under duress, and then they come later and say, actually, and then the law will actually tell you, hold on, under what circumstances did this person tell you what they told you? If the circumstances had been different, would the testimony be different? Is that not what we're saying here? That had it truly been that, the law in itself was not applied when that agreement was being brought up, you can actually then come back and say, you know what? This didn't make sense in terms of how the lines were drawn.
But the thing that has to be asked, so are you saying you didn't understand what you were signing? Are you then saying that they varied the contract after you had signed? What really are you saying?
But the law first and foremost states that it shall be mandatory for us to actually have
An agreement. Okay.
Within the law. That agreement.
So already we have signed. I've already signed. Now, why are we changing tact? And to make matters worse, if I can throw in one more last one, which is we now then disagree or agree afterwards, and then we agree, and we actually come back to the authority and say we have agreed, but you still get penalized. You see, that's where now where the retailer is actually going in, like, okay, so even after that disagreement, because even in the Kenyan law, no one can force a union of 2 people, including marriage.
But what I find strange is, if what we're discussing borders criminality, then the person who created that contract, the one who signed it, should both be culpable because they both committed an offense. You've signed onto something that is not legal, and you have provided something which is not legal to be signed. So essentially, you are both breaking the law.
The law is finding one of them to be a victim.
Victim is
One
The
had
one
buyer
who signed
power,
is the victim, the other
one
had
coerced.
power.
The one with power
Yeah.
coerced
The other one.
the other one.
I am
to
actually questioning this concept of buyer power, and I'm saying that in an economy such as ours, where one is allowed free enterprise and you're allowed to trade freely, are we then saying we are abrogating the law of willing buyer, willing seller?
Dr. You can answer that.
All right, let me answer that. Now,
And we've got 40 seconds.
40 seconds. Oh my goodness, and I have so much to say. But anyway, I'll just keep it short. The reality is that what sometimes we call consent is actually obtained under duress. And the code of practice that Willy refers us to, interestingly, raises the issue of duress a total of 5 times and encourages and warns and requires retailers, his members, to stay away from duress. So consent extracted from duress, and we know such situations even in actual life, does not give validity to a contract. My 40 seconds still.
They're over.
They are over. They were short. Those were not 40. Those sounded like 18. Right?
But Dr. we thank you very much for joining us today, and Willy as well. Dr. Priscilla Njako is the manager buyer power at the Communication Authority, and Willy Kimani is a lead supermarket sector at RETRAK.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.